So before we start this podcast, we've been having some troubles with playback on the iPhone podcasts app. The podcast is playing on the iTunes app, so we don't think it's an issue with Apple. However, we're not sure. We've tried a few things. We're a bit at a loss here, so if anyone has any ideas or any help, please just message me, message Neel. But yeah, we're having some troubles with the iPhone podcast app, but you can always listen to it on Spotify or YouTube. All right, enjoy the podcast. Okay. How's it going?
Pretty good. Here we are.
Here we are.
Yet again. You know, it does actually just feel like a lot of... I know. I do feel like this is, you know, that whatever that like island that floats above the planet in Dragon Ball Z is. This apartment reminds me of that.
I never watched Dragon Ball Z. I was like the one kid who didn't watch it.
Look,
I know
you've got this your whole life, but
Super
what the
Saiyan.
fuck? Why not, bro?
I know. Yeah, I know. I
But
watched
why?
Pokemon. I watched Digimon.
Dragon Ball Z was too violent. Was that
No,
it?
I just never got into it.
What?
I know.
I don't know how you didn't.
I know. I love The Simpsons. What else did I watch when I was a kid?
Rugrats, cat, dog.
No, I didn't watch those.
No?
I watched Recess.
Yeah, that was
That
great.
was. I loved that show. Kim
Yeah.
Possible. All the Disney Channel
They were
ones
all
I
sick.
really liked.
Yep. And their sitcoms. I stand by it. They are better than most adult sitcoms.
Oh yeah. Oh, they were fantastic. Oh,
Sweet Life of Zack and Cody.
Kim Possible.
Yes.
I had a crush on her.
Yeah, she was. She was fine.
And
And
there was
so was
always
her mom.
that friend of hers always trying to hit on her.
Ron Stoppable.
Yeah.
Well, wouldn't
Classic.
we?
Yeah.
Yeah, he did what we all
Yeah.
would have done.
Yeah.
Dude, did you know, as just a quick side note, I just found this out the other day, so I may as well just mention this. The mole rat is Nancy Cartwright, the voice of Bart Simpson on Kim Possible.
Wow.
I wonder how much she got paid for that.
How did she have time to do that?
Well,
Well, I guess animation wouldn't take too long, would it?
I know, especially because all of her voices was just like, yep. That's all that mole rat said. Yep.
Yeah. Why would the creators of Kim Possible ask one of the most famous voice actors of the time to play a mole rat?
Yeah.
Maybe it was just a passion project for her.
Wow, that's what she felt good about doing.
Yeah. Giving back.
She was just jealous that she never got asked to do any Pokemon voiceovers.
Maybe.
Yeah, it's just because of that shitty little... You know why? Because it would have just been a very steady, easy paycheck for 60 minutes of your time once every
Yeah.
few weeks. It was this podcast for her.
Oh, voice
Except-
acting.
Okay, I found this on the web for a very steady, easy patient for 60 minutes of your time.
So that was Siri just picking up something. What did you say? Did you
Well,
say a
that's
word that was kind of
really
like
terrifying.
Siri? I don't remember. Anyway, we don't need to cut that out. I think that's pretty funny. We'll keep that in there.
Fuck, I feel like a caveman. Just, I'm not used to smartphones and seeing that.
What were
Just
you
like,
talking
"Oh!"
about? Nancy Cartwright, something. I don't know. Must have accidentally
Nancy.
said Siri. Well, I can't keep saying it. Then she'll... Anyway.
Jesus, she's forever in your life. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You're not scared by that? Okay. Well,
No, it's
let's
a
go on.
comforting voice now. That's
Yeah.
scary, isn't it?
And also, can you do those things?
That's
of,
dystopian.
Siri, do you like me? And she goes, I think you're special just the way you are, Neel. Does it do that?
She didn't do that for you. Let me try.
But did she?
Siri. Hey Siri. Do you like me?
Thy friendship makes us fresh.
I don't know what that means.
Thy friendship makes us fresh.
What is
So
that?
she's combining Shakespearean language and
Fresh Prince of Bel-Air language.
urban speak.
Damn.
She's cool. I like you, Siri. If you were a
Yeah.
girl, I'd date you. Well, I'd ask.
That is what men want out of a woman. Just like, can you give me a compliment now? Okay, well,
Yeah, we're dogs.
I'm getting
Men are,
closer.
it's the oldest cliche there is, but women are cats and men are dogs.
no, it's true.
It's 100%. I've got a cat. It's true.
Want patch?
That's my evidence. Well, I've got a cat.
horny. Yeah.
She's only nice to me when she wants something. Typical. and she's clean, and she doesn't slobber all over the place. She's not dirty and loud,
No.
but she's up herself
No.
and thinks she's God's gift.
Super territorial.
Yep. The podcast is going in an incel direction again.
Man, it's very telling of us, isn't it?
It's fine.
Okay, well, if you're happy with it,
really
I'm very happy with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I've noticed a lot of my videos becoming slightly more. You know what it is? Because I'm single. As soon as I go through a dry patch, all my videos just have some level of incel mentality in them.
Seriously?
Yeah. Yeah.
It all just becomes about sex.
Not just about sex, just
The
about like,
dryness of it.
women suck, eh? Like,
Dude, it's just like yeah.
'Cause I literally am an incel,
day.
then.
Yeah, damn. Yeah, okay, all right. It is just you are it's,
There you go, I'm
being a
just admitting
YouTuber is being a mid 2000s rapper. I write about my life. It's that. It's like my album's an autobiography.
that's true. MTV, yeah, YouTube's the new MTV.
It is though. I like that. I like the fact that you know what's really cool about art that obviously everybody else has figured out, but like everything else in my life, I just have to read it in a book and go, "Did you know that the sun revolves around the earth?" But the point is that
What?
just dude, I feel like I have no street smarts at all. None. I have a lot of book smarts purely
You
because
didn't
I've read
learn
a lot.
any street smarts growing up in the mean streets of Newtown?
Yeah, all right.
Didn't live the
That's
thug
true.
life?
I did learn that. Yeah,
The
you can-
inner west thug life? Didn't learn how to roll. Surely you would have learned how to roll a joint, man. Newtown.
All right, knew how to roll a joint, knew how to get wristies in a graveyard without getting caught, learned how to get cheap chicken deals, just being like,
That's
"Wait,
very
can I get-"
specific. Wristies in a graveyard without getting caught.
Yeah, dude, that, look,
Was that a
if
thing?
anyone is from Newtown High, tell me if that's still going down. The kids from like years 7 to 9 going, you know the cemetery I'm talking about in Newtown. And they sit in, I never did it. A, because I never had the opportunity, but B, I really hope that I wouldn't have ever been that desperate. That was something that like the
Fuck,
goth
I would
kids
do it
did.
Today.
It's essentially necromancy, dude. Like, I really hope that you're like, okay, you have your own apartment.
Well,
you
I
do
actually-
realize
Yeah,
that.
I know. Yeah. So I really don't
Still, I
need to
wanna
be in a
get freaky.
graveyard.
Oh fuck! It's
was on
so
the
scary
table.
thinking about that. Just
not with a girl in high school, but
no,
more my age.
no. You just want one of those like pornographic goosebumps covers
Wristies-
of a dead hand just going. "Eh."
No girls. I don't think I've ever. Nah, I've never come from a hand job.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
I
actually,
don't think. I'm trying to think. No, I have to finish it off.
yeah, I think so too. Well, there's like a couple of very good counter examples that I have in my mind, but the constant is no, you don't.
Yeah, I mean we've just had so much practice from when we were 12, 13.
Yeah. It's comforting.
Can't compete. Anyway, this is good. This is how the podcast works. If you're new, we have 10 or so minutes of very random banter at the start, and
Yeah,
then we
mostly
get
just
into,
talking about sexual frustration.
Oh yeah, and then even though he's in a long-term relationship, well that's why. Yeah.
Yeah, they go hand in hand. It is just
Wow.
being an incel.
Wow, who's actually getting laid out there?
You know,
Just like 5% of guys. That's it.
oh yeah, for sure. It's like dudes that are not on the A team of Australia's cricket, but those like stand-in dudes. They are getting a lot of puss, and I don't have to work that hard.
That's so. That's just so precise.
But can you deny it?
I would.
You
I
know
mean,
that
I
they
would
are.
have. No, what? Wait, what? So like the A grade cricketers, but not the ones in the actual team.
Yeah, A-grade cricketers that are like the supplements. Those guys.
Really?
I know, because I know a couple of them, and they just live in an apartment, and their entire life is just this conveyor belt of new ass walking in.
Sports stars in. I would just say sports stars in. Well, cricketers and footy players for sure.
That's true, but they do not get as much as the B-grade ones, because first off, women don't know that much about sport, so they're like, oh, yeah, I think I've seen you on TV before, but the other thing is the ones that are in the A grade, they have to at least focus on sport a lot. These guys don't. That's why they're not on the front bench, and they know they're not good enough to be there, so what else are you going to fill your time
Wow,
with?
you really know nothing about cricket.
No.
The front bench. Wow. I mean, anyway, let's get it.
You can fill in the gaps.
Let's get into the What did I want to talk about? Suffering.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me about it, Neil.
So I've just been thinking about it a little bit lately,
Because of your
and
incel endeavors.
well, yeah, lack of endeavors.
Lack of endeavors.
More
yeah.
than anything.
Yes, of course.
But just it's a concept that's been explored throughout philosophy for a time immemorial. But people who find virtue in their suffering, and I think that I've just been noticing that on even just a day-to-day level, people I talk to, and I've been noticing it in myself as well, that people think they're for most people, we think we're owed something if we've suffered to a considerable degree.
Owed?
Yeah.
Expand on that.
So I just the thing that brought this to my mind was I was having a conversation a couple of days ago, and I've had this conversation with a few people where I talk about what I did after high school. And what I did straight out of high school is I took a gap year, and I started teaching improvisation and drama at my old high school. Now, my high school was very generous. They let me use the drama room rent-free, and I'd already been doing it in lunchtimes for 3 or 4 years, so a lot of the kids knew about it. I'd performed at assemblies and things like that to popularize it, and as a result, I had 3 classes during the week, 25 to 30 kids in each class, and they were paying $10 a week. So I was just raking it in as a 17, 18-year-old. I was making $800 to $900 a week.
That is very enterprising.
Yeah, working 4.5 hours a week. And I
What?
wasn't even doing any other... Well, I was preparing the lessons and driving back and forth, don't get me wrong. And I was charging them... Look, I was charging them $10 a week, so it was not an exorbitant amount. I think that's quite fair. I don't think I was, making a bad deal out of it or anything like that. And as soon as whenever I tell people that, especially when I told people that when I was younger and people were still working casual jobs, and you know what casual jobs are like if you're working at fast food restaurants or cafes, it's pretty long hours.
That
and
$10.
yeah,
each
it's
hour.
whatever it is, $10-14 an hour, and you're working much trying circumstances, and people would just get annoyed at me.
Yeah, of course.
And so, and then that made me think, like, why are they getting annoyed at me? I think it's because they think, well, I'm working 8 hours a day, 5 hours a week, and I'm only making half as much as you, and you're working 4.5 hours a week. And I was, like I said, I didn't inherit anything. I wasn't handed down a company or anything like that. And there is, I think, an element of, hey, my suffering should, if your suffering is so much less than mine, yet you're being so much, you're gaining such a greater amount of reward for it, that's not fair. And I've even observed it in myself to a certain degree. I'm sure you felt this as well when you look at some of the things that get a lot of attention on social media, and you think, that's just not fair. That's just not fair that, like, an Insta girl who posts a photo of her art. Here we go, back to the incel mentality here. An Insta girl who
about
just,
5 minutes.
yeah, posts a photo of her ass can get that much attention and that much more money when we put so much effort into our videos. In the same way, I'm sure a filmmaker would be looking at us thinking, oh, these guys just do videos. I've spent a year creating this short film and it got viewed by 10 people at a festival or something like that. And then you can just... Don't you think you see it also in just in older people in the way that they, I work my ass off this many hours a week, yet this wanker can earn this much money. You see it in relationships. You see it with older women who seem to think younger girls that get out of a relationship, oh, your generation is just so easy to throw the towel in. It's so easy for you guys to throw the towel in. You don't suffer in the same way we did, and that sort of mentality. I'm just seeing it all over the place, and I just wanted to explore it and talk about it with you. And
well, dude, is it suffering or is it envy? It sounds like the main point is
I think
envy.
they're interconnected, though. I don't think that
Yeah,
envy
that's
would
true.
exist if they didn't have that suffering, because they're obviously not happy with what they've had to endure, and as a result, rather than question their choices and what they've done, it's much easier to just think that the world is unjust and, oh, it's not for this person got a free ride.
That's true.
See it, in politics as well.
It's actually, dude, you have identified the root. Well, Buddhists, I guess, identified it before, but yeah, I don't know if you came to it yourself or whatever, but it is the main. Buddhism always says that everything kind of just comes down to, just basically being like complacent or suffering. That's pretty much it.
Right.
Really, at the end of the day, all the emotions are just a variation of those two things.
There you go.
And I think you've done it. You're right. It is the very specific examples that you were giving just then are examples of envy. It is just that category of suffering. But suffering is basically just that mental state of not being complacent.
Yeah.
So everything is but another way is like complacent or not complacent.
But do you think that for people to not feel envious when they're suffering, they need to adopt some sort of ideology that says that there is virtue in whatever they're suffering for? I mean, you even just take religion, like Christianity, for example. There's so much about suffering for the cross in that. So, they're foregoing so many little pleasures. They're foregoing their own happiness in many instances because they're suffering for a cause.
Yeah, and that's why I don't think. Well, that's why I don't know, wankers and smart people that wankers follow. Let's just exclude the wankers from that. But I think that smart people are always, your Richard Dawkins of the world and stuff. They're just like God, But they will always give like a special exemption to Buddhism because they've kind of identified it a little bit better than Christianity has. So it was Christianity, for instance, they have that. Well,
Christianity weaponizes it.
Turns it into
Buddhism,
a virtue.
Identifies it.
Identifies it as a thing that you want to be avoiding. Whereas Christianity says that you should sort of sacrifice things for that and it's just a less precise way of saying that, because Buddhism would be saying the same thing, that like you should give up the chocolate. But it is saying that because when you don't have the chocolate, you are sad. So don't have the chocolate and then you'll never be sad. Like Christianity is kind of getting to the same message, but it's got like a few steps that it's sort of missing, I guess.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about people being envious and then them just being in like a non-complacent state, it does come back to that point that I guess when you look at the most successful people, when you break it down in religion in the US, it is Buddhists, and it is because they are constantly moving away, and they have techniques that they have learned from kids of how to avoid suffering. And that's the thing, is because when they are focusing on that, instead of focusing on... Because, dude, you know what? This just reminds me of, like, not my first interaction with you. My first interaction would have just been doing, like, open mics at the same time or whatever. But just you doing Australia in 2 minutes, and I think that the only reason that I have a career is because I had a self-help mentality of, like, that guy's doing something successful. Like, that's the model you should be following, not just sitting around in a dingy basement with a bunch of self-hating people. So
you're saying you owe me 1% royalties of everything that you own?
I do. I'm not going to give it, but, like, yes.
So Australian 2 minutes was your biggest inspiration in life. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it was. There's no... I mean, look...
Wow.
I mean, look, it's really weird thinking about that from your perspective, that's become your I didn't do it in life, right? But
yeah,
in my life, that is sort of my Bible.
Wow.
Sort of like
I'll take it. I will take it.
Like, yeah, I remember looking at it and just thinking, fuck, Neel's onto something here. Wow. And it never really hit me before because I was just searching around and doing the Triple J and the ABC thing, and that got not going anywhere. And if I kept doing that, I probably would have had about as many minutes as there are in Australia's 2 minutes exposure on ABC2 at this point,
Yeah.
Like, it just, that was the old model. And I truly do thank you for it.
Oh, well, you're welcome. You're welcome, mate.
Because, dude, you did actually, in a lot of ways, you did pioneer that, and it is because you do have that little enterprising spirit. Someone was talking about this the other day. I can't remember who it was, but your name brought up, and they were saying that about you, that you just have this very... You have like a very business-minded attitude to life, and that.
Oh, I do and I don't. I don't think I'm very business-minded because money's not a huge concern for me.
But it doesn't matter about the money part, right? Like, yeah, okay. Well, I guess
it's
if the
part
money
of it,
part
don't get me wrong.
Yeah, but it is to everyone, and I understand what you mean by that. That some people it's just their motivator in life, and that's an evil thing. But there's like there's a business-minded person, and then there's people that are just like into investments and things like that, and that's like an offshoot of it that is kind of more money-focused. But
same entrepreneurial.
Yeah, it's like that.
I think that's different.
Yeah, it's
make a slight differentiation there.
Well, okay.
Because I
I
try to
think the
think.
original word that I said, like enterprising, right?
Yeah,
You have an enterprising spirit.
I'll take that.
Don't you reckon? And you should take
Thank
it.
you.
Because I didn't even know that about you before. That's actually really interesting.
Well, yeah, like that first job I had. I mean, like that's the thing where everyone's like, "Well, my first job sucked," and I was like, "I had like the best job in the world." Because I was doing what I loved.
It sounds like it's better than your job now.
Yeah,
It sounds
in
mad.
many ways it is.
Yeah.
Because I was making a killing, and look, I was very lucky there. Like I said, the school didn't make me pay any rent, and I wasn't. Their insurance covered the kids and things like that. Eventually, they changed that. Had to pay insurance. When Australian 2 Minutes came out, ironically enough, they said no, you can't teach the kids anymore, because one of the kids showed their mum the video. And that was a sad day. That was a sad day. But I just employed a bunch of people to do it and paid them a very reasonable, like $40 an hour or something. So they were getting $60 for the session. And think about it, if there's 30 kids in the session, there's $300. I'm giving them 60. I'm just, for literally doing nothing, I'm like, yeah, give me $240.
Really?
Yeah, and then I kind of felt bad, but then I also didn't, because I'm like, well, that guy's getting $60.
They wouldn't have been getting the 60 otherwise?
Yeah.
And, dude, that's a fair wage.
So then, you know what? That is a business minded. That is a very...
No, you are enterprising. No,
Yeah.
so actually, yeah, no, I changed it. You're right. It is business minded.
That's very bit. That part was very business minded, admittedly. But yeah, going back to suffering, I just...
But no, okay,
It
sorry.
po- okay.
Yeah, you go.
Well, I want to make a point here about the suffering I see when it comes to political ideologies. So, if you take the Bernie Sanders style of politics, the rhetoric is always economic justice, and I think definitely Bernie believes in that, and a lot of his supporters would 100% believe in that. But how many of them are just envious? In the same way, a lot of, if you take a Trump or any sort of political party or policy that purports to be in favor of nationalism, patriotism, the country first, how many of them are actually just racist?
See, the thing is, you will find people in the Bernie Sanders camp that are just envious. And I know exactly what it's like because, you know, if you ever go to any Labour circles, if you ever go to anyone that's like concerned in climate change and all those kind of things, you will find those loons, and that they do. Those people definitely do exist.
And that does it worries me. Like I like a lot of the policies, but I am hesitant to be on the same team as people who are just envious. But you never know how great a proportion that is off the particular
because it's
ideology.
a mind, like what you're saying, right? Like if you're just talking about the individual of it, yes, the people that understand Bernie Sanders at that level of just like, yay, I want a free college tuition and that sort of stuff. Look, I don't empathize with the individual for having to pay college tuition and crippling debts and things. I just see it as a national thing of like, if you are making college free, it is going to benefit the nation later on, right?
Sure.
It's just this thing of like, what is your attitude and perspective as to why you support those policies? And so I think that that's the whole point, is that like what you're saying is people that are, you know, of that suffering, like I'll get back at those people are attracted to that ideology, right? But there are other people that don't have that mindset.
Oh, without
right?
a doubt. And I think with any political ideology, there would be people who are just suffering and have some sort of, they're just getting on board with the tribalism of it.
But that's the whole point. Is it's just like, that's not really a reflection on on Bernie Sanders himself and his philosophy. It's just like it's like because
I'm not saying that at all, but yeah, there's just reservations because it can embolden those people in the same way that there were huge reservations about Trump, because even if, well, you could make an argument that he did espouse some level of, if not fully racist, like casually racist rhetoric or whatever, but it did embolden the Richard Spencers and the white supremacists of the world.
Yeah, but the thing is that, like, I think it's just on you to develop a more expansive mindset than that, because it's the same thing that always just boils down to, it's, you know, people that just see politics as like, you know, social justice warriors, they're getting back at social justice warriors. It's just like it's this very insular view of life. If that's the way that you view politics, I can guarantee you that the way that you view your life is going to be extremely inwardly focused. And if you are extremely inwardly focused, you're not going to have those kind of attitude, those ideas that you had of just like, if I give a service out to people of improv and just pay and charge them like a little bit amount of money, like that benefits me as well as them. And so it's like this win-win interaction exchange thing. There's like a bigger concept there than just being like, I need a job. I should get more for my job. Yes. I understand that.
Yeah, no, and again, I'm not saying that it's like the primary factor in any kind of refusal to support those kind of policies. But I do think about it. It's part of something that I do.
What?
Like that's not my be all and end all. I'm not saying a certain amount of people are just adopting that particular ideology because they're suffering and they want to get back at people. Like I'm not going to make a decision simply because of that. But I'm just bringing up in this podcast that it definitely is something that exists, and it's something that I wanted to discuss.
Yeah, but I think that is mostly like an individual decision that you have to grapple with yourself, and like I guess we could just go back into that whole cultural thing that we talked about a few episodes ago. But like the thing is that if you go to Bhutan, for instance, Bhutan has very good policies implemented for its own people, and the people are definitely not suffering. And why is that? It's because Buddhism is taught to them as an age of being kids. And when you meet Bhutanese people, everyone says the same thing. When you meet Bhutanese people, it's like meeting the Dalai Lama. Like, you just feel enlightened being in their presence.
I think a lot of people should try to be aware of their suffering as much as possible, whether it's in their work life, a lot of it exists in relationships, don't you think?
Suffering.
Don't you think? Yeah, like,
it's not just intimate relationships, it's like just any relationship.
Oh, yeah, any relationship, but I would have an inkling to suggest that some people who get married young and maybe it's not the most successful marriage, they're the ones who are the most vocal about other people who might not choose to get married or might not want to even get married. They're saying, why are you not getting married? You should do that. Well, we did it, and I've had to endure all of this suffering in my marriage, so why should you have to... Why do you get to live that life? You're just not as virtuous as I am. Really conservative politicians who are the most vocal about homosexuality often are homosexual themselves, and because they've suffered through having to suppress that, they feel, it's not fair that they get to give in to those temptations. So as a result, like they find a sense of ego in their suffering.
Which is what it is. Well, I suppose it was like what I wanted to talk about before.
I mean, even just real quickly, a lot of people who might be in traditional media or not even successful, they're not successful comedians, they're not successful YouTubers, whatever it may be. Whenever you talk to them, they always have some sort of justification, like, I could be successful if I just did that, or no, but I'm doing it the proper way. I'm not giving in to commercialism. I'm not just giving people what they want. I'm thinking bigger than that. Like, there's some sort of justification rather than looking inwards and saying, well, maybe the decisions and the product I'm putting out isn't actually that good, because that's a very confronting idea to grapple with.
And extremely self-absorbed.
Yeah.
That's the other thing as well, because I think a massive point of that, when they're always just saying that, no, I'm not selling out. No, what you are doing is you are not offering people a service, and that's why no one is watching you. And if you watch their content every time, it's extremely autobiographical. It's always just about them.
Yeah.
How's that going to relate to other people?
That's right.
And that's the whole thing about like your work is always just like what little culture, what little niche can I focus on?
Very complimenting me a lot on this podcast.
Well, dude, it is actually something that I think...
It's a good ego stroke.
Dude, you deserve it for this specific subject, especially. You've really nailed this very young. I have observed that.
Wow.
Definitely.
Wow.
I think that's something that you've kind of... I don't know how you got into that very early on, but there's definitely this inherent understanding that you have that it's envy's not a good place to be.
And having said that, I'm not immune to it either. I mean,
no one is.
I look at reality TV a lot of people look at reality TV and it's just like they get millions and millions of views, and I'm like, it's not fair. I look at those pranksters on YouTube; they get 5, 6, 7 million views a video, and all they do is go out in public and throw eggs at people or whatever they do. Which, yeah, it's kind of funny. I'm not gonna lie, I still laugh at that, but it's I have to be aware of my thought process there and think, no, you're just being envious, because your natural response is to just, it's one, to be envious, and then I think the next step after that is to belittle them in some way, to justify your suffering, say, oh no, but they're not as smart as me, so it's fine, it doesn't matter.
And then the next stage after that is it just starts becoming self-inflicting on yourself. There's like an old Buddhist saying that's just like, suffering is like burning your hand. Pain is burning your hand. Suffering is holding on to the coal that burned your hand. And
there you go.
I think that's what happens, is that like once you start getting down that path, and we know it in the field of comedy that there's just a lot of those comedians that have that attitude, and they, are older than us, much older than us at this point, and their career has not taken off because they have never gotten past that point of just constantly just having this extremely insular view and nursing their suffering and seeing just being comfortable with that. But the thing is that, man, there's actually this great book called Create or Hate. I really think that that's like something.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Something else that I think that you really get into, which is that, like, dude, if you aren't making something, you just start bitching about other people's shit. And that's what I always get now when I just have that, like, fuck this isn't fair.
Yeah.
I just go and just be like, okay, I'll just start writing something down. Your brain just goes off to that.
That's a really good philosophy to have. I would just add that not necessarily if you're just not making anything, if you're not getting anywhere, you could be making things. I know a lot of people who are writing and making videos and then they're just not going anywhere. And as a result, they're bitter, they're envious because they think that, I've suffered for this. Like, how is it fair that this person who posts a TikTok gets all these views and attention, whereas I've made this really long, elaborate short film or whatever it may be, and I get 20 views?
Because they don't understand that what you have fostered more than anything is, I think it's, again, that thing of just like you had that original enterprising spirit, which is why that you just went onto TikTok, like you've got this thing
a
of
lot
like
of the other comedians went onto TikTok before me.
Yeah, but like I haven't, like all of those other comedians haven't. I mean, as you said, some of them have. But the thing is that, like, there's something there that they aren't doing, which is that they are constantly thinking, what do I want to make? Why doesn't anyone like my thing? It's all very inwardly focused, whereas you're thinking like, where are the people? How can I reach those people? What service am I going to give those people? It's very reflective in your work because most of your work is trying to like encapsulate an attitude of the time or a culture of the time. So you're just saying, which is a service that people want, clearly.
Yeah.
People do not want your little story of like, I just saw this like old man walk up and help this like little kid build a castle, and so I just thought I should make a short film out of that. It might be sweet. I'm not going to click on it.
And when you look, when you become cognizant of suffering, you just it's everywhere. As soon as you talk to 90% of people, if you let the conversation flow long enough, they start complaining.
Right.
Everyone. And look, I understand. Everyone needs to vent. I've got my things I want to complain about too, but when you're aware of it, you just find it quite confronting, really, that many people in, relatively speaking, without a doubt, there are issues in this society. No one's denying that. But over the course of history, we're one of the most prosperous societies of all time, yet everyone has something to complain about and something that they're suffering.
It is something.
With.
It's. I think a lot of it also is the fact that in modern society, there's just it's because like there's just so much free time. It's like your cat.
Yeah.
It's like your cat doesn't have to hunt. So what does it do? It just sleeps and then plays with pins.
Just complains when it doesn't get food. Yeah.
And whines when it doesn't get food.
Wow. Yeah. Didn't think of it like that.
And humans
free
aren't that
time actually, contributes to it.
They're not far from it. Yeah, it's free time.
Because then your thoughts begin to fester, and you've got more. When you're not thinking about, wow, I really need to get my next meal, you just start thinking about things that aren't that significant.
Yep. Or
Interesting.
You figure out how to like move that free time into something constructive, and those are the people that just go further in this society. And I think it is because most people never think in that direction, that they don't go that place. So I think that like, yeah, I get the same thing when I'm looking at like prank videos and stuff of just like, yeah, that's bullshit. But
All the time.
I think
Makeup videos, I'm like, oh my God.
yeah,
Oh.
but I think I just do have that attitude of they have
Yeah.
they have
ultimately.
their like lane in life, and the thing is, at the end of the day, like that's cool that they're getting those those views or whatever. But
Their success doesn't affect my success.
no, doesn't affect your success at all. And the thing is, like, I don't know, I don't really know what your like inner thoughts are, but when I see those moments,
Mostly sex.
actually, yeah, I do know your inner thoughts. They are that.
It's mostly sex, man.
Yeah.
It's mostly the puss.
Yeah, you do. That is your money.
Well,
in
there you
life.
go. There's more. There's another perfect example of suffering. It's the incel, the nice guy mentality. Oh, I've done so much. I put so much effort into pleasing you, and yet you don't give anything back to me. Well, there's no, just because you've put all that effort in and you've suffered for your cause to try and get the girl. There's no actual law of the universe that says you are going to be aptly rewarded for that.
Well, you could argue that the law is that you are not going to get rewarded for that.
Yes, so if anything, it contradicts what you
Yes.
think. There you go. Yeah, you're right when it comes to that. Yeah.
And I think, again, if you look at the men that are most successful with women, why are they the most successful? It's usually because they're bringing a fun vibe.
Yeah, here we go again.
Ah, fuck. Okay, yeah, we've fallen into that category. But
No, but it's relevant. It's relevant.
it's just, if you are offering something that people want, you will be rewarded in life. And does that necessarily mean that you should do it? That's the other thing that I'm always grappling with, and I always just come to the conclusion that no, some things are bigger than that.
Yeah.
So you try and think of ways to, include those elements and build something bigger. That's what I think of it as.
And going back to the political manifestation of this idea of finding virtue in suffering, I don't think it's exclusive to socially democrat policies at all, because even in what is commonly termed as identity politics, all that is finding some sort of ego in suffering.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I've endured a lot
missing
more
out.
because, and there's a certain, and don't get me wrong, there's a certain truth to it. There's conversations that we should have, and now I think people have gone so far the other way that they don't want to talk about race at all. But I think conversations about culture are much more interesting and relevant than conversations about race. But having said that, there are definitely people in that identity politics camp that find a sense of ego and virtue in what they believe they've suffered for.
Mm. And that's the whole game.
Have they even?
That is the whole game.
Yeah.
That's all, and that is why it's exploited so well, and that's the modus operandi of marketing and advertising. If you go there, that's what they will drill into you over and over again. Find a pain, exploit that pain. People will buy your product to alleviate that pain. Which is why, again, I say that
we can
identity
consume our
politics
way
was a
out of
thing
we can consume our way out of pain.
Yeah. Which is why there was something really gross about the 2016 election, because it was kind of like, I think there was like this to distract from the fact that there was like problems that should have been addressed. They had this thing of just being like, on Hillary's camp, of just being like, yeah, get back at men so you can get a woman elected. And like in Donald Trump's mouth, there was like this kind of like underlying tone of just being like, no, we're not going to let the women win. They're always getting their way these days. Like there was that feeling in both of their campaigns, and it was that thing of just like exploiting that pain.
And there's just as much exploitation of pain on the other side as well, even though they're the ones who say, oh, the other side needs to toughen up. But I think
if you
what
look at
happens
it,
is
it's
that
no grievance.
no, exactly. They've said, well, I haven't had an easy life because I'm a white male, or I haven't had an easy life because I'm a male. So is my suffering less valuable because I'm a man?
Yeah,
Which is actually it's a fair point to make. I find, I don't know if you've observed this, but going on in an Australian cultural perspective, the third generation Greek Italian immigrants and just WOG immigrants, they are the most vocal about being against, the snowflakes and identity politics, even more so than white males. And I think the reason for that is they actually endured a lot because of their ethnicity in the 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever. They were the ones called wogs. They were bullied relentlessly back before there were any anti-bullying campaigns or anything like that. So their thought process is, I can only imagine, is, these whiny millennials who are talking about their trigger warnings because someone said something about their race. Whereas what they're really saying is like, the pain I had to go through was so much worse. So why the hell should you have it easy compared to what I had?
And it all goes back to that.
Do you think,
would you to suffering?
Yeah, would you agree with that observation of because on Facebook at least, and from the people I've spoken to, yeah, it seems to be sort of middle-aged European immigrants who are actually they are very vocal against that.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of the older white people sometimes are in favor of it.
God. It is. It's just all like it's all just this huge manifestation of being self-obsessed.
I mean, I had inklings of that particular mentality as well, because I wasn't immune to being teased for my race in primary school, and to a lesser extent in high school, but I still had it, and to some degree I was made to feel insecure about it. But as a result, I went the other way and I said, well, no, but that suffering means something. Like, I'm not going to just give in to that.
You know what it all... I think that's what that's why, like... God, I never even thought of that connection before. Like, I knew that, this whole identity thing was used because it, like, works extremely effective in campaigning. It's just going through that marketing mechanism of finding a pain and hitting it. But, dude, that's what it is. It's just... It's a pain that everybody feels. And so it's easy to exploit that pain. And the thing is that with these kind of, like, if you are focusing on that pain, like you were pointing out, you're not actually solving anything. Like, you are just getting sold a product, and that product doesn't actually have any answers. And so really all it is doing is making you just fester on that for someone else's gain. But it's not your gain.
Yeah.
The actual gain of it would just be like,
suffering doesn't
enjoy,
end.
like, have your little Twitter fest, that's fine.
Does
I'm
the
out
suffering
of that.
end? Now, another thing that because Australia Day was pretty recent, and when this podcast goes out, it'll probably be a month or two.
Yeah.
We're very organised.
Have Jade.
And I wonder with the whole movement towards reconciliation, how much of these things are actually going to alleviate a lot of the suffering that Indigenous people may feel.
Well, see, this is the whole point, and that's what my Australia Day thing was, and that just created all kinds of fucking controversy.
No, but like, changing the date doesn't offset the horrible atrocities that did happen.
Exactly.
You can do the welcome to country. You can say sorry. You can do all of that. Nothing is actually going to. I mean, I would like to talk to an Indigenous person about that. I just don't. To me, I just don't think any of that is an adequate offset to actually to what transpired.
Well, I've always got Indigenous people coming up to me, and obviously they're going to be a sample of people that like me. But after my Australia Day video, there was heaps of them that just came up all the time and just like, yeah, dude, fuck all those people that are constantly complaining about that shit. But obviously the ones that like hate me for it wouldn't come up and say that. But they wouldn't just come up and go, fuck you! But, the thing is, dude, honestly, I see it over and over again. I see...
It really is that, like, what's next? Like, then it just keeps... I think in 10 years we will be... Well, because already in the Democratic primaries, they were having conversations about reparations for African Americans. And I can imagine in a couple of election cycles, Australia will be having conversations about reparations.
No, but the thing is, what they should be having conversations about when it comes to Indigenous relations, and that's what I was pointing out in the videos, is you should be talking about constitutional recognition of Indigenous people. And the reason you should be talking about that is not... because, again, like, it's just grievance politics bullshit. And that's the reason why, like, Australia Day is constantly pointed out. And why do these companies like Junkie and... like they exploit it. It's because it's just, again, like you're selling that pain
the
or
grievance
whatever.
And just a quick caveat here, I'm not, I know it almost sounds like I just have that typical, you're just complaining, shut up, just deal with it or whatever. And that's not what I'm trying to say here.
I am saying that, but
well,
okay,
no,
keep
but
going.
I am trying to
like you might be
like
saying
the
something different,
constitutional
but-
recognition. That's a real issue. Like I'm just saying, to what degree will this actually alleviate any suffering you may have?
None.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's because then if it does alleviate your suffering, what does that say? That says that the simple action of a date change just completely that just forgives everything that happened, and that's not going to be the case. No one's going to actually feel that way. So
No.
it's just.
But dude,
It's-
this is
it's
the whole
like
thing.
you've
Like
been in
actual indigenous advocacy groups don't give a shit about changing the date. And you know why they don't give a shit about that? They don't give a shit about that because like Indigenous communities still face things like leprosy and like huge quantities of I can't remember what it's from, but like a lot of Indigenous kids in rural communities just go deaf at like age 10. There's all these other things that are happening, and it's not so much a thing of like, it's not so much a thing of just like Australia just being like inherently racist and trying to fuck Indigenous people over. It's just a thing of like they live in remote communities, and so it's just very easy to forget about them.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
like they're not gonna, they don't have the numbers to like, you know, go and lobby their politicians for treatment and shit like that. And so that's like a constant thing. And so like when it comes to changing the date and stuff, dude, a lot of the actual Indigenous advocates find it quite irritating, is what I've read in the literature.
Yeah.
And that's why you see even reflected in the statistics, most Indigenous people don't think of like, don't have this thing of being like, oh my God, it's Australia Day, this is awful. Most people are just kind of just like, yeah, mad, have a barbecue or whatever. Like it is an inner city grievance. That is what I've observed. And it's very obvious when you look at the people that are most vocal about changing the date on Australia Day. Every single time you look at them, it's never people of like great magnitude. It's just like people on Studio 10 fighting and shit, you know, like.
That may have changed, but I'm only suggesting that based on my social media feeds. I know a lot of the few Indigenous people I do have on social media who aren't really in that inner West bubble or anything like that, and they're vocal about changing the date. So it may have changed, but
yeah, again, I'm just saying, like, dude, it's
yes.
actually like it's a stupid point to focus on.
Yeah,
it's like the
sure.
same thing as, dude, it's like I can say exactly the same thing about, you know, like just constantly going on about, I don't know, just like shit of just. Look, I'm trying to think of like equivalent example, but the thing of just like constantly people that are just like hooked into Crowder and just constantly focusing on that kind of shit, of like the white version of that, of just being like, it's just not fair, we're just not getting the grants and that kind of shit. You know, like, it's what you're saying. It's just like, if you actually wanted these things changed, if you wanted actual like justice for Aboriginals or whatever that shit is, like, you would be thinking about these bigger issues, like what Bernie Sanders is focusing on when he says that, you know, climate change is going to affect, you know, poor people in the south much more than it is going to affect rich people in the north. Yeah. It's these bigger things.
Sure. And moving away from a political context as well, to me, a somewhat apt comparison could be if you've endured a bad relationship or an abusive relationship, if the perpetrator can apologize as much as they want, that's never, if you feel like, oh, that I was treated unfairly, they can apologize as much as they want. If you've got to change that mentality ultimately.
Yeah.
You know, there's only so many apologies that can actually stop that suffering.
Well,
Would you?
I think,
would you
yeah.
agree?
I think when it comes to all of these ideas, when it comes to every angle of suffering, there is kind of one cure-all. And I think it is really trying to adopt a mentality, like, it's like a change in focus is the main point. And I think the second point is just like, I really do think the Buddhists are right. Like, the older I get, the more I just get into this headspace of, dude, contentment, that's what you should be striving for your entire life, is just being content. That's it. Like, honestly, the best I feel is not those like, yay, roller coaster moments. It's just this. And if you can get into that when it comes to anything, when it comes to like the political side or relationships or anything like that, it's like this thing of like, that person was in my life. Now they're not. You can just have this attitude to it. And it's a hard thing to foster.
No, yeah, and there are obviously, there's a practical reality. If someone's wronged you, you should you deserve some form of justice. I'm not saying that's, but
do you? Do you deserve some form of justice?
In the society we've built, I'm talking about, if someone commits a crime against you or something like that, then
Yeah, but
your
like,
mentality of saying, "Oh, I was wronged," and that you can dwell on that forever, and no matter what happens, that person can go to jail or whatnot. But if you always feel like I was wronged, I'm deserving of something more, that will be a permanent state of suffering. So
see, yeah, that's I guess what I'm getting at more, where it's just this thing of, I think the Buddhist teaching that they're constantly pointing out is that just like you will have numerous opportunities to suffer in life.
Oh yeah.
Can you grow past them? And the point is that it's just this thing of like, and I you know what, actually, it's actually something my dad says all the time. Like anytime anything bad happens to him or anyone else, he always says, life's not fair. And like when I was a kid, I was always like, fuck you, Dad, just do it, But now that I'm a bit older, I think he's actually that's the right cosmic perspective of it. It's just like some people cop it worse in life, some people don't.
No, you have to strive to, you have to aim for that mentality.
So if you can just get into that mindset of like, like this is my lot in life. If you can just see it like very factually of just, this is what I'm experiencing right now.
Yeah.
Going through life like that gets rid of a lot of the what is known as suffering, right? Like you can just experience pain, observe it, and move on, and that can be emotional and physical and whatever. And I think it's kind of the same thing with relationships. It's definitely that thing of like, and also, you know what else I think really helps with pain in relationships? The perspective of Wayne Dyer, who's kind of like an American version of Buddhism. He's just taught. Every time I've ever gotten into anyone who's gotten into a breakup and they're just like, I don't know what to do, man. I'm just like, go watch heaps of Wayne Dyer. And then he's just like, I don't know, he's just like this helpful, nice grandfather. Yeah, but he's like a real 80s self-help power force. And everybody at the end always just has this, I love you, Wayne. I love you too, man.
I mean, you can understand and empathize with the mentality of someone who's been in a 10, 20-year marriage and the other person has cheated, or, the other person has done the wrongful action. Of course, you would lean towards, you would be suffering in that situation. So any sort of help that those people can get would be, I'm sure they would very much appreciate it.
No, that's true. And I do recommend that you go and look out at him. But essentially his teaching would say that if you were in that situation and somebody cheated on you after 20 years, there would have been a lot of things behind the scenes that were building up to that cheating. And you might not have been in pain, or they might have been in pain, but somebody wasn't content in that relationship.
Yeah.
And so for whatever reason, that relationship had to end. And you kind of have to get to the point in life where you can just accept that. And I think that's the accumulation of Buddhism in a nutshell. It's like constantly accumulating acceptance, just being like, this is how the world is.
For some reason, my mind, just when you were talking about that relationship analogy, my mind went to comparing that to the political analogy, and almost as though the person who's cheating has adopted an ideology similar to like an extreme political ideology, saying, yeah, I'm entitled to cheat because this person's wronged me that much.
Yeah.
I just found that really interesting.
Well, you know that is like a lot of the reasons that a lot of the time people cheat in those long-term relationships is always that reason. They feel justified in cheating.
And I think a lot of the times people do any sort of acts that they themselves, if you ask them just in a neutral context, hey, do you think this is a bad action? They would say yes. But the reason they do it is because, no, I've been wronged, so I'm justified in doing that.
It's a common excuse with criminals.
Yeah. I mean, unless you're a psychopath, almost all. I would imagine most people who, if it's petty theft or whatever it may be, they say, well, yeah, the typical, you don't know what I've been through, man.
Yeah.
That's such a
That's their
common
constant.
trope.
Yep.
You don't know what I've been through. And that's true, I don't. And you probably have been through a lot of hardship. But yeah, every person has to adopt a philosophy that regardless of whatever hardship I've been through, there's a moral standard I have to attain.
And there are other people that have endured worse hardships than that person that did not do that.
Yes, there's always an example of someone who had it worse than you, and there's always an example of someone who had it better than you.
Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah. So, man, yeah, at the end of the day, I think that's what...
That's what Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot.
What does he say?
Well, he says that, like the suffering is a cause for a lot of the really evil actions that happened throughout the 20th century and things like that.
Yeah. And it is, there's always just this, as soon as things start getting into, you're right. It's always like, I'm getting back at that person.
I mean, look, forgive me, I don't, my modern history knowledge is not nearly as good as it should be, but it wasn't, what Hitler did instill into people, it was the German people were suffering, and he said, well, we can... it wasn't like, oh, we're great and we're better than the Jews. It was, hey, we're
getting back.
Yeah, we're getting back. Like we've been treated unjustifiably here. So what we're doing is okay.
Yeah.
I didn't articulate that very well, but the point was
that
like
was
that
the general message.
it was a weaponization of suffering. It
Yeah.
wasn't, and in the same way, a lot of the anti-Muslim rhetoric from some of the right-wing parties in the Western world. It doesn't come from a place of, we're white and therefore we're better than everyone else. It comes from a place of like, no, we've been treated unfairly and the immigrants and the Muslims have been given all these advantages. So as a result, we're getting back at them.
So I think that's actually probably a better phrase, and I've seen that become more frequent in language. I don't know, maybe in the last year or whatever. It's kind of moved from identity politics to grievance politics. I think that's fairer.
Yeah, but
That's
I also don't
more
think
what
it's
it is.
fair to just... I think it's everywhere in politics. There's always, in every political tribe, there's a certain percentage of people who would adopt that particular ideology because of their suffering. And I talk about this in like every podcast, but...
Yeah, but you're right.
And it's relevant. I mean, look...
But you're right, yeah, there's always just like, there's an element in every successful campaign of we're getting back at this group.
Yeah. Everything. Yeah.
I mean, look, in the last campaign in Australia, what was the campaign? Like, Labor's campaign was, we're getting back at the big end of town. That was the phrasing that they were using. We're getting back at the big end of town.
Yeah,
The Liberals' phrasing was like, they're coming for your benefits.
Yeah.
That was what they
we're
were
getting
coming
back.
at.
And also there was like a slight, we're getting back at those like inner West greeny
Yeah.
wankers who keep talking down to us.
Yeah.
That was definitely, even though if it wasn't directly said, I think that was a mentality a lot of people had.
Because it's just so powerful to weaponize that.
Yeah. There's a lot of people, a lot of suffering. Yeah, and like I said, when you start thinking about it, you see it everywhere, and you see it in yourself. I see it in myself all the time. I'm trying to get better at dealing with it, but it is human nature.
I don't know what the alternative is. I think, obviously there's the acceptance point, but there's also like a cultivation that needs to come into your mind of looking for opportunity. Because the thing is, you know what I think I am?
Yes, because you can find a cause to suffer for, but a lot of the suffering, I think the poor conception, the poor manifestation of the suffering which becomes the envy is that people feel that their suffering wasn't aptly rewarded.
Yeah.
So I go back to that first anecdote of what I did outside of high school, and everyone else had a really low wage, crappy job that they hated. So they think, well, that's so not fair. I suffered so much more than him. Why did he get so much more money than me?
Yeah, so it was just this thing of, and again, this unwarranted sense of justice. But see, this is the whole point, is that you should probably be looking beyond that, because the concept of justice really just exists in your mind. There's no such thing as justice in the animal kingdom. It just doesn't exist. Like, you just get eaten. That's it.
Yeah.
Or you don't get eaten. In the human world, there's kind of like a separation of that because of like the legal system and stuff, but it's all sort of invested. It sort of is, isn't it? Justice for sure it is.
It's a cultural construct, yeah.
And it changes from culture to culture what justice is, but
and it changes, I think, even from each individual because people who are, well, we all look out for the self. We're all self-interested to some degree, some more than others. So we always have a skewed version of justice that skews towards us.
Yeah, but I think that the attitude that those people should have adopted when they saw you is not like a feeling of justice. It should have been a thing of, in life, there's only results.
Yeah.
And that's what it boils down to.
They should have, but I completely understand the mentality because I just see it in myself as well when, as I said before, looking at the pranksters and some other, even just stand-up comedians who are extremely successful who just really aren't that clever. But you got to get out of that mentality. It's not healthy.
Yeah, but if you adopt the mentality instead of just being like, they just did something different, and so they're getting a different result.
Without a doubt, that's what I aim for now.
And I think that's like,
everyone listening should aim for as well.
They shouldn't they? Because the alternative is to sit there and say it's not fair for X, Y, and Z reasons.
Yeah, it's
gross.
Yeah. So yes, we are nearing the end of the podcast here. I just think people should be aware of one, their suffering, and then they'd become a lot more aware of the suffering with the people that they have close relationships with and the people around them. Because I just can't help but, like I said, almost every conversation I have, if you just let the other person talk, they will eventually go into something that they're complaining about.
And isn't it much more uplifting being around somebody that's always talking about, I guess, opportunity?
Yeah, or at least then they can talk about something, whatever. That you can talk about what you're annoyed about to a moderate degree, but then have the common courtesy to ask questions to the other person. One thing that just turns me off so much, even though I've just said I'm an incel and I'll take anything, but not anything, but
getting there.
Yeah, slide into my DMs.
Fuck.
Look, it's been all right. Don't get me wrong. If you're on a date with a girl and she only ever talks about herself,
which is the majority of the population.
Well, yeah, I know, and it's really. I think, especially if they're, because we're not good at calling girls out, are we? Men are not good at calling girls out on bad behavior, whereas girls will always call guys out on bad behavior.
Yeah.
Because we're just like, oh, she did that thing that I didn't like, but I still want to fuck her, so I'm not going to say anything.
You know what? Ironically,
so they haven't been able to refine their character. And I'm not. This is a select few. Because there's just as many men that are like that as well. But
you're not dating them.
Yes, I'm dating women.
Yeah, but I think that also if you had the conviction in those scenarios, instead of just being like, can we fuck yet?
Yeah,
as opposed to you just being like, you're talking about yourself. Well, anyway, just stop doing that or something. Well, not that level. But, I think that if you do call them out on their behaviour, you will garner respect.
No, I agree. Yeah, I'm trying to do a bit more of that.
Because you're right. That is what those, I just think most people have just been cultivated to just focus on themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that that's not just a societal thing. That is a result of just this society being heavily marketed on. So all marketing is constantly just being like, you, Special K, Dude, that kind of shit. You're so special, you deserve this sugary fucking cereal.
Damn.
It's that. It's just constantly making you focus on you. So you're more susceptible to their message because they know that is the best way to get your attention.
Yeah.
I guess that's the end.
That is, we have to wrap it up. In conclusion, there's not much more we really need to say there.
I think we've really gotten to the crux of it though, which is that if you are ever suffering, notice it, as you pointed out, and then I think just remind yourself of this. There's only results in life.
There you go.
There's no such thing as justice. There's just results.
That's a great way to end it. Thank you guys very much for listening. And we'll subscribe if you haven't already.
Tell some friends about the podcast. Help us out.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.